he was spicy and he said some really funny things, like objectively. Brigham Young, though, really loved the saints, and that's like a defining characteristic of him.
I, for one, feel like we need justice for Brigham Young. I think he gets a bad name.
Oh, Heavenly Mother, we can't, all she is like a baby machine that can't even talk to her children. And it's like, whoa, why? Why do we think that?
Just to clarify, we do not practice plural marriage in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today.
Monogamy is sexual socialism, which gives all men the opportunity to get married. It's a way of controlling the young male syndrome.
Like, what were these quotes? Like, I need to know. Yeah. Should I be hating on Brigham Young? And what is the context that they're in? Let's get into that.
Let's get to the nitty gritty.
This episode is brought to you by Tiny 3D Temple, some of the coolest way to display your faith inside your home. Check out the description below for a coupon code. Now back to the video.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Women of Ward Radio. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Celine Anderson, and we are going to be talking about the not-so-secret lives of Brigham Young's wives. Tikla, do you want to introduce more about this topic and our guest?
Yes. So we are lucky enough to have Celene here with us today. I have a little bio here for her, and I'm going to read some of it because it's extensive and lovely. So Celine's been working in the film industry in Utah since 2018. She's produced The Next Door. Do you say CRYO? Is it Cryo? Or just Cryo? And Java Jive. These films center on and explore Latter-day Saint cosmology, theology, and identity. Most recently, she produced the short film The Angel, a Mormon pioneer horror film set in polygamous 19th century Utah. The feature film version, The Third Wife, is currently in development. I can't wait to hear more about that. That's amazing. And I assume that it's been researching for that film that has helped you have so much expertise on our topic for today. So I'm so excited. And she is trained in media dramaturgy and storytelling. She advocates for Latter-day Saints to tell their own stories through the lens of unapologetically claiming their identity. In order to do so, we must navigate our own histories on their own terms and be unafraid of the peculiar, whether or not it makes us comfortable. So I think that's a good lead-in to talking about Brigham Young, early polygamy, and Utah women, these early saints, and what their lives were actually like. I, for one, feel like we need justice for Brigham Young. I think he gets a bad name out of context, and so I hope we can clear up some of that. Just to clarify, we do not practice plural marriage in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today. The principle stands as far as like you can be sealed to multiple spouses and things like that for eternal families. But we have one man, one wife, as God has declared is the standard. That is the norm, and that is what we live. And so, but we will be talking about that time in history in the early church when we were, as a people, practicing plural marriage. So, Celene, where do you want to start?
I mean, we can start wherever. I know people love to bash on Brigham Young, and that is like a pastime of people these days. And I know that was something you had specifically wanted to talk about. And so I'm happy to start by talking about Brigham Young from a female perspective, because people will say, Brigham Young said so many problematic things pertaining to women, and I've read a lot of them, and I just don't think they're problematic. In fact, I think that Brigham Young is like one of the funniest men I've ever read about. Like he was spicy, and he said some really funny things, like objectively. My favorite story being him just like ragging on Thomas Marsh's looks because of, he's like, he was an apostate and now he looks like that. And it's like, it's kind of crazy. And I'm like, I have it written down if we want to review that, because it's just funny.
So Brigham Young was like the Donald Trump of his day.
He is certainly speaking off the cuff a lot of times. Really, I find that Brigham Young, though, really loved the saints, and that's like a defining characteristic of him. Someone that like everyone who's critical of Brigham Young or not critical, just wants to know more about Brigham Young, that they should look into is Legene Purcell Caruth. This is like this incredible woman that if you've ever met her or seen her, she's like 70 years old, and like her work is like in her physicality. Like she kind of has this like hunched over like demeanor from all her years working on this. But basically she became an expert in not only Deseret, the Deseret alphabet, but Deseret alphabet shorthand. And so she went through and actually retranscribed all the original shorthand notes of Brigham Young's discourses. And so she has read everything that has ever been written, like quoting Brigham Young before. And she also says that when they would originally transcribe it, a lot of changes were made that really kind of show a distinct change in personality. And I don't know, going through the words of like a woman talking about having read every single thing Brigham Young has ever said, and the fact that she's like, I love Brigham Young and he had a good heart, like that carries a lot of weight for me. And so that's something that I think is very, very important. Something she says is, versions of his sermons are at time a poor caricature of who he was and how he really spoke, and talks about some of the changes that were significant enough to change our perception of his personality. So one of the things is pronouns were often changed from I to you, as well as an inclusive we, to a more detached they. So for instance, compared to if you and I live our religion in the original shorthand, the version that was put out was if the Latter-day Saints will live their religion. So it turns him from being someone of like, hey, we're all in this together, to being very like talking down to the saints, which he like cuffed about. He has this thing, I will cuff them about, and it's very cute, and it's a very sweet thing.
I like that you're pointing that out about Brigham Young's quotations, that no one had a tape recorder, no one had a video camera. Even in today's age, with video cameras and tape recorders, people can get misquoted, spliced according to the bias that the reporter wants. But think about back then, it was shorthand. And when you look side by side at different people who were taking notes or doing shorthand on the same speech that Brigham Young was giving, they're different. There's chunks missing from different people's, or different pronouns are used, different personalities come through. The person who's writing has their own bias on what Brigham Young is saying and how he's saying it. And so that's so important when you're analyzing what he said, is that you have to remember, okay, first of all, did he really say this? And is that really what he meant? And let's look at all the different people who wrote it down so we can get it as accurate as possible. He was a great man.
Yeah, exactly. And another change they would make is changing things from questions he would pose to being declarative statements, which certainly changes like a tone of like, hey, I'm having a dialogue, because his things, they weren't published and like they weren't often premeditated of like what exactly I think he knew what he was going to talk about, but it wasn't like a prepared statement that he's reading off a teleprompter. He is just kind of speaking more.
But you mean he didn't have his own entire marketing? He didn't have his own marketing and PR department to run every single thing he said through to make sure if it was politically correct and everyone would receive it well? Gee, what would that be like?
And if in 200 years it would also be received well?
And turns also, out, when you're trying to establish a new land, like, and feed everyone and survive, that's not a high priority.
It's kind of messy.
And how long was he? I'm not great on my history. Like, how long was he the prophet? How many years?
I think he died. Let me check when he died. I think it was 77. Brigham Young, and so we have 44. So it's like what? That's 30. Yeah, 77. So 44 to 77. So 33 years.
Like I think one of the things that's interesting for me is I'm from Vermont, and Brigham Young is actually from Vermont, as well as Joseph Smith. And Vermonters, people from New England, have a very like unvarnished, direct. It gets us in trouble. Like that's the style and the manner of speech, and you tend to not trust people who aren't direct. You're just kind of like, well, what are you trying to sell me? And so when I listen to some of the way that Brigham Young speaks, I'm like, I can trust that. there's a person who doesn't care to some extent how they come off. I know they're not trying to sell me something. So that's just like an interesting like side note. I mean, and also like 43 years, like so many different seasons would have happened that he would have been addressing different, either a crises or a time of growth or economic development, like so many different seasons. Sorry, go ahead, Tikla.
No, I was just going to say, I think I hear a lot about how, okay, he seemed to come off this way, but he was really great. And I'm like, okay, what are these quotes that everyone's talking about? Like, what are these things that Brigham Young said that are so heinous, especially in relation to women, since we are all women here on this panel today? Like, what were these quotes? Like, I need to know. Yeah. Should I be hating on Brigham Young? And what is the context that they're in? Let's get into that.
Let's get to the nitty gritty.
My favorite one that people love to point at is him telling the polygamous women to stop whining. And he's like, they're saying that they have not seen a happy day in 5 years. And like, they just need to stop whining. I will not have them about me scratching and tearing. And it's very much used to villainize Brigham and polygamy in general.
You mean the same thing we say to our children every day? I feel like that's a very normal phrase. Stop whining!
Women are not children. Women are not children.
They are not children. But you make a good point, because I've gone through and I read that entire discourse, and I'm like, he actually makes some really, really excellent points, and he actually sounds more... And I'm always shocked by how many Brigham Young discourses sound like group therapy to me. Like, he might be saying it in a slightly more direct way, but certainly he's saying things that I'm like, yeah, a therapist would say that. Like, he kind of talks about things in regards like not being codependent and not being, like he talks about with this kind of like whining discourse, he talks about this idea of like, a man's not going to make you happy. Only you can make you happy. He says specifically, let me find the exact thing he says. He's talking like a woman speaking. He's like, but, says one, I want to have my paradise now. And says another, I did think I should be in paradise if I was sealed to Brother Brigham. And I thought I should be happy when I became his wife, or Brother Heber's. I loved you so much, and I thought it was going to be heaven right here on the spot. What a curious doctrine it is that we are preparing to enjoy. The only heaven for you is that which you make yourselves. My heaven is here, laying his hand upon his heart. I carry it with me. When do I expect it in its perfection? When I come up to the resurrection, and then I shall have it, and not till then. But the women come and say, really, Brother John and Brother William, I thought you were going to make a heaven for me. And they get into trouble because a heaven is not made for them by the men, even though agency is upon women as well upon men.
How many wives did Brigham Young have?
56, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so maybe he did 50 too many. That's a little...
I would actually 100% agree with that. And the thing is, so much of this is because Latter-day Saints, because we actually practiced polygamy for such a short period of time, and we never established any sort of wife limitation, we have this sort of like these larger groups, especially in like the upper, like with Heber C. Kimball and Brigham Young, those sorts of people. Now, these were always going to be men who are extremely wealthy and also extremely powerful. And so it's also like, well, sometimes women are just going to be more willing to deal with more people for more wealth and power. But I do suspect if we had continued, it's likely some sort of limit would have become the case. If we look at Islam, there's a 4-wife limit. If we look at some Jewish writings, there's a suggestion of a 4-wife limit, and that continually pops up when we look at the data, which is really interesting to me. But we also have the Exodus scripture, which is don't take on an additional wife unless, like, if you take on an additional wife, your existing wife or wives shall not be reduced in her right to like raiment, food, or marital duty. And so it's like if you only take on as many wives as you can treat justly.
Yeah. I was like,
well, I've actually thought about this in context of the man's perspective, because I think we think a lot about how women would be disadvantaged in this situation and men would be just like, oh, this is a dream come true. And I disagree completely. I think it would be a deep sacrifice for both men and women And I think if in the man's position, it seems to me that if you were called upon to live this principle, that the best, easiest way forward would be to have as many as you could, because that shares the it kind of distances all of it from you. Like if you just had four even, I think the potential for fighting and jealousy and contention and so many things to navigate would be greater. And so I could see the temptation to have many, so then it feels a little bit more of like a congregation as opposed to like, I don't know, is that making any sense at all?
I get what you're
we
saying.
have the ages of the women. Weren't there several that were older and potentially
that happened a lot
needing to
with
be
polygamy. That my great grandfather did that. He took on several older widows and had them sealed to him and took care of them in their older age and took care of their children, their older children also. It was an amazing way to just take care of each other.
And there's a wide range.
Everybody became family.
Of those marriages, and especially when you look now, here's the thing also people aren't thinking about with Brigham Young's polygamy specifically, is he also was dealing with the succession crisis. And so symbolically, him and a lot of other men in higher positions of the church took on and were like married Joseph Smith's plural wives. And this was kind of viewed more as like kind of like a levirate marriage, where it's like, we're taking them on. It's a symbolic showing that this authority and this household, like it's showing these women are like, yep, this is the new president of the church. But very much those women were still viewed as being sealed to Joseph. And so you have an excess of women also because you're doing those sorts of sealings. You also do have young people are going to be like, there are also teenage marriages, but also both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young had some of the first anti-marital rape language in how they talked about sexuality between a married couple. And just so we all know, before the 1870s, marital rape was legal in every U.S. state. And it wasn't until 1993 that it was criminalized nationwide. And today, even today, 10 to 14% of married women experience marital rape. Like, this is a big deal. Jeez. And it is significant to me that in early Latter-day Saints, this is specifically coming from both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, they talked about the idea that it was sinful for a couple to have sex when their feelings were alienated from one another. And that is really, really fascinating to me. And so there's also discussion where it's like, because it's sealings, so many of these younger marriages were viewed more as betrothals. And it was like, hey, you're going to be into this household. But like, whenever you want to have sex is kind of up to you. Not to say that there aren't exceptions to that, where you have gross men who are doing bad things. Of course, that's going to happen in any system. But that's not the institutional view or the institutional ideal of what was prescribed and recommended.
I think it's really important when we talk about polygamy and early years within the church, especially for people who might be listening who don't really understand why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were practicing polygamy. So can you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely commanded of God or instituted by God. And I think that sometimes we're like, oh, it was an Abrahamic sacrifice. And God never really terms it like that. It's the works of Abraham, certainly, but it's not, as people love to point out, they're like, well, Abram didn't really sacrifice Isaac, but these women actually did do polygamy. And I'm like, yep, because it's not actually an Abrahamic sacrifice in how I view it. I think that
there are some theories that
demanding.
Abraham did kill Isaac, but
Yeah, I still have PTSD.
Different word radio episode.
Very interesting. I would love to hear more about that. But all that being said, like, of course, I think that, I mean, it's kind of like what you're going to bring to a situation. I think any social system it at all is going to have costs and benefits. Being single has costs and benefits. Being monogamously married has costs and benefits. Being polygamously married has costs and benefits. Having children has costs and benefits. Having a lot of children has costs and benefits. Like, you don't get anything for free. Like, everything, sorry, that was kind of like a cruel, direct Brigham-like way of saying that. But
Well, it's interesting you bring up like the cost and benefit. I watched your interview with Greg Mattson, which was fantastic. I was like taking notes of things I wanted to bring up here. You all should listen to that. It's great. You spoke so much about like anthropology, like the history of why it was so good, why people needed it to survive, and then now socioeconomically, it's not really needed as much, and we can have one man and one woman, and the woman can work, and we've kind of progressed. But you're saying, we'll come back to it. I think it's very interesting to put polygamy in a not socioeconomic
context.
Thank you. Context.
Yeah.
Like an eternal context.
Yeah.
Rachel, I was talking to you about this about FAIR. So much of our, the icky feelings about polygamy or our problems with polygamy are like, oh, it's not fair or it doesn't work. We're putting it in a very mortal context. Like, okay, I don't like polygamy because it's not fair. And I love how you say we're making fairness, we're idolizing that. That's the most important thing. Like, we shouldn't be. And then also like, well, I don't like it because of the relationship is affected between man and a woman, and all I care about is that having that one-on-one, that secret special relationship. Whereas if we're putting in an eternal context, is that what is most important? Fairness and this secret special relationship? Or is what's important like your tribe, your posterity, however it comes here, their success? Like God's work and glory is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. Like man is that they might have joy. Like is that what our priorities will be, our joy will be? And however it happens, whatever marriage looks like whatever, because we just want our tribe, we want our posterity, we want our friends' posterities, anybody else's woman's posterity. We just want them all to be okay, and that's our priority. I have to mention my grandfather grew up in a polygamist home. So I'm many generations removed. Like my grandparents were all in their 40s when they had kids. So my grandma was born in 1899. My grandma would be 126 years old. Jeez. My grandmother. So my great grandmother, she was a second wife, and she was married during the Edmunds-Tucker Act, so it was very secretive. She was asked in secret. They were sealed in secret. After a while into the marriage, she had to take on a different identity and move in with her in-laws, and it was really, really difficult for them. But they did it.
Move in with your in-laws.
Well, they knew. They knew what was happening. But I loved what she said, that it helped me. She kept this journal, and she wrote a lot about it, and it was very insightful. And one of my favorite things that she said is about the first wife. And she says, I sympathized with her, for I knew the experience was a hard one, and that she, as well as myself, was making a great sacrifice, one that involved many pangs that were not transient, but will last while we sojourn in the flesh. Then we shall lay down these bodies, and when we can see things with a spiritual eye, all will be well. And that just helped me zoom out from the myopic ickiness of polygamy and just zoom out. That I love I just all coming out. Celene, you said in that interview with Greg Mattson, you said, I don't even remember what I was going to say. Oh, never mind. It was great. I'll think of it.
Okay, but
well, I'm sorry. I'm still curious because we still haven't really talked about it. And I just want to kind of put that out there, at least on this, for this video. Like, I mean, aside from it being calling from God, why polygamy? I mean, I'm a numbers girl, so I kind of want to hear from you as to what was the reasoning for it. But
yeah,
for me, I mean, if I'm going from a number standpoint and I look at, hey, this information needs to be spread throughout the nation and then the world, how do I do it the best way that I do it? From a number standpoint, it makes sense. Because if I have widows, or I have a larger number of women, and I mean, if I'm just thinking of it from a standpoint of that, I can spread this information a lot quicker. And then if I'm going to be another wife to a man, and then we have 10 kids, they have 10 kids, and we're all part of this, then those kids have kids, and we've explained to them what the truth is, and we've given them knowledge of the plan of salvation, and all of the things that we learned from being a member of the church. If I'm doing that from a number standpoint, I get to my end goal and gathering Israel so much quicker if I institute polygamy. But that's just the way that my brain works in trying to make it make sense. But I want to really hear from you, Celene, like, because you've done a lot of research on this, like, what is, like, in your research, like, can you kind of just really dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to start by this quote from Joseph Smith that I feel very strongly about, where he says, "As God has designed our happiness and the happiness of all his creatures, he never has, he never will institute an ordinance or give a commandment to his people that is not calculated in its nature to promote that happiness which he has designed, and which will not end in the greatest amount of good and glory to those who become the recipients of his laws and ordinances."
That's what I was going to point out that slipped my mind. That exact thing.
Yes.
That's so amazing.
I feel very strongly about that. And I have a lot of faith in that, first of all. Second of all, now let's go into like the nitty gritty of it. Okay, so a big thing that people will complain about with Brigham Young is he talks a lot about curses. He talks a lot about the curse of Eve. And so it's like witches, and early Latter-day Saints were specifically thinking about thy desire shall be thy husband, and he shall rule over thee, being like a curse of Eve, right? And then we really can also look at Adam, which Adam also has a corresponding curse, which I did talk about in the Greg interview vaguely. But people get really like fixated on this because I don't think we think about curses the way that makes sense. I mean, because people will be like, well, why would God place that curse? And I'm just kind of like, that's just kind of the natural way that the world kind of is. The fact that as a woman, basically any man could chase me down, throw me to the ground, rape me, and murder me, and there's nothing I could do about it. Like 100%, like that could just happen to me from most men. Like that seems like a curse to me, you know? And when we look at rates of domestic violence, we look at the fact that the most likely person to murder a woman is her intimate partner.
That's so sad.
It's very, very sad. It's very heartbreaking. We look at the fact that when there are, like, men are significantly more likely to divorce their wife when she is like chronically sick, versus a woman is less likely to divorce her husband when he is chronically sick. Yeah, so we look at these things and I'm just like,
that's
okay,
crazy, because the man's supposed to be taking care of the woman. It's like totally switched. Wow.
Yes, but like, again, I think that we are underestimating the role that other women play in blessing our lives as women, and how much other women need other women. Because like, yes, a man can just overpower me, but if there was two of me, like that'd be a little bit harder, and there's three of me, like we have a pretty darn good shot between the three of us to not be killed by him, right? Not to say that like, because it's a marriage relationship and it should be trust. I get that, but we also need to look at the very real power dynamics. Now let's take this into a theological standpoint. So people will be really upset when we look at the temple, and it was like becoming a priestess and a queen to your husband. Everyone's like, what does that mean? And he's to God and I'm to what is that? And then so they changed it, and it's in the new and everlasting covenant. What's the new and everlasting covenant? It's marriage. It hasn't changed. It's the same. So how I view, what we also know from early Latter-day Saints with polygamy is the sealing of children follows the mother. So if the mother is resealed, the children go with her. That's how it was structured. And so when we look at it this way, we look at the sealing covenant more like a very interesting line where men and women need each other for exaltation. We already believe this, right? And if you believe that we have, like, if women go through men for their sealing to God, which is kind of how it is structured in the temple, whether or not we like that, men go through women to access their children, right? It's kind of becomes this line sort of thing. And so there's that control. And that's how the power can actually be balanced in a lot of ways. So that's really interesting. And I think that when women are given the choice, and so when they're given complete choice, because we also have this structure, when we look at the family proclamation, a man is presiding over his home. We can soften what that means, but that is what we believe. We live in a patriarchal religion. How can we make that just? That's inherently the way Abrahamic religions are inherently patriarchal in nature. How do we make that just? Well, you make it so women have complete and total autonomy in who they are choosing to marry. Monogamy is sexual socialism, which gives all men the opportunity to get married. It's a way of controlling the young male syndrome. It's a social mechanic that was artificially created by Greek and Romans, and we have inherited in the West. Now, I do think that a lot of good comes from that, and I talk about that in the Greg podcast, where that has allowed us to be more empowered in certain ways.
Sorry, say that again. Monogamy is a social construct from when and where?
So monogamy was a legal invention by the Greeks and Romans. Like, that was not really that legally imposed. Like, you can only marry one woman. Before that, like in other cultures, like 83% of world civilizations have practiced polygyny.
That is a fascinating statistic.
Yeah. And so a lot of that, people can go to that and be like, okay, well, when you have like really, really powerful, wealthy men, they can just collect women. And I do think that that is a problem. And then I think we can even look at early church where there are large amounts of wives. I do think that that is not ideal. I think that just because we can affirm the divinity of plural marriage doesn't mean that it was always practiced in the optimal way. I mean, I think it's very telling that the end of D&C 132 is more will be revealed on this. And it's like, well, we're still waiting for more to be revealed about this. So we don't have all the information. They didn't have all the information. They were trying to work it out. But sorry, I need to figure out how to structure this better.
Wait, while you're thinking, I just want to point out a theme you've been saying a lot is like how men and women are different, like biologically different. Our needs are different. In marriage, we're different. In the church, we're different. Elder Renlund spoke at this big, like, county-wide multi-stake women's meeting a couple weeks ago. Tikla, you were there, and a large part of it was question and answer, but like sent in questions, and they had prepared answers. And he said in one of his answers, he said a lot of women were asking about the asymmetry between men and women's roles in leadership in the church. And that word really stuck out to me, that he used the word asymmetry. I guess I never really, if people have been using it, I hadn't really latched onto that yet. But he didn't use the word imbalanced. He didn't use the word unfair. He didn't use the word unequal. He used asymmetrical. I love that term.
Yep.
Because if something's symmetrical, it looks the same, right? But if they're asymmetrical, right, they look differently, and that's okay. Like, that doesn't say anything about power. That doesn't say anything about role or importance or worth. It's just, it looks different. Men and women, their roles, it just looks different. And so I love that you're describing it so casually, that we don't need to get stuck in these differences. It's asymmetrical.
Well, it's very important that, like, with the asymmetry, I mean, that's just the basis. Like, when we just go clear to, like, the bone of the matter, the reproductive relationship, which is how we define men and women, is inherently asymmetric. Women take on the physical cost of childbirth. Men do not. Now, men do have better outcomes in their posterity if they have a paternal investment, which is why, as a species, fathers are highly, highly evolved. Like, we have really, really good fathers as human species. And I think that we see this modeled in a heavenly father who is clearly highly invested in his children. Yes. And that is something that we should take as very, very empowering. I think that we're so used to looking at things in very narrow ways that I'm like, let's just tear it open and look at it in more exciting and twist things. So, for example, something that, I mean, I especially hear this in kind of the Exmo space, where it's like, oh, Heavenly Mother, all she is like a baby machine that can't even talk to her children. And it's like, whoa, why do we think that? I think that there's multiple ways we can spin that. For example, we know that I think that we learn a lot. We know that all things testify of God. We know this. And so if we look at how our things exist in our earthly life, we can kind of learn new things. We know the same sociology that exists here will exist in the millennium, right? So we know that we can have these sort of clues, even though we're in a fallen world, we can kind of navigate and try to figure these things out. So let's take children. Women, when they're taking care of their baby, have a larger oxytocin, like bonding and happiness chemical when they're comforting their child, when they're holding them and making sure they feel like secure. And children have that highest hormone release also with mom, which is why when a child is upset or hurt or sad, they run to mom, because that is where they feel the most comfort, literally on a hormonal level. Fathers, they get the biggest hormone release when they are playing with their children. And that is the same for children, which is why when children want to have fun, they want to have fun with dad more.
And it's always right before bedtime, too.
Always right then. What that shows, though, is it shows that like women, like mothers, teach children to be secure, create the security, and fathers teach children how to be away from mom. It's play and resilience. Sometimes when I think about mortality, I mean, I have 5 different Heavenly Mother theories, and I'm like, if little old me can have 5 different Heavenly Mother theories and be satisfied with it, I'm sure the real explanation is satisfactory. But anyway, one of them, and this is probably my favorite one, is this idea of like, hey, we're here to learn and to gain a body. Is this not sort of a play and resilience time with dad?
And getting away from mom.
And it's kind of like, where's mom? And it's like, she's doing other things. Like, the universe is huge, you guys. Like, she can be doing a lot of things. Not that she's not invested, but certainly why we're so myopic in our understanding of eternity, that it's like, there's so many more possibilities. And especially because we don't know about them, we can speculate all day about this stuff.
Yeah,
and so
she's just doing some self-care.
Yeah, she's doing self-care, or she's like, if she's doing whatever, she could be doing anything, or they.
But I do love
anything, as President Oaks said the other day.
It makes sense that the adventure we're on right now, where we are symbolically away from home, would be presided over that with that masculine fatherly energy. That follows, that tracks, that makes sense. Can I insert a somewhat personal story? We've been talking very like anthropologically and scientifically, and I think that's fantastic. But I also think sometimes it's nice to hear like a human perspective. So I had an experience living on the island of Saipan when I was 16, 17, almost 18, with my family. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's over by Guam in the Northern Marianas Islands.
Thank you, Tikla. I was like,
I didn't know where it was until I moved there. It's owned by the United States, but nobody knows where it is unless you're a really World War II enthusiast, because it was a strategic location that was acquired during World War II in order to be closer to Japan. So my family moved there to teach English. My dad taught English, and it was a fascinating experience. It's this little tropical island. It's 5 miles by 12 miles, very small.
Wow.
And it had a little bit of the energy of like a Native American reservation, in the sense that there had been a lot of handouts given to the local Native people in order to help them be okay, but it has kind of hindered their ability to progress a little bit, where they're very reliant on the government. And the culture, by virtue of being taken over, has been kind of wrecked, right? So they're a little bit disconnected from their roots, and so the moral fiber isn't super strong, especially among the younger generation. So as a teenager, it was really challenging to find friends who shared my morals outside of our tiny little branch of the church. And I'm going to try not to be too long-winded with this, but so I'm a 16-year-old in this tiny branch, and there's a few core families who are active members of the church. And we got very close, very exciting. And there was a bunch of friends my age in the youth group, and we had great friendships. We were really close. We were like siblings. But at 16 years old, I tried to imagine my life if I was stuck on that island. Now, I knew I was going to get to go away and go to BYU and find my Prince Charming. But when I took a moment to imagine what would happen to me if I was stuck here, if this is where I needed to live and raise a family,
Hey guys, we're just going to press pause on the video here for a second to remind you that there's a coupon code in the description below for tiny 3D temples and all of the cool stuff that they have in their online store. Check out the description below. Back to the video.
And when I thought about the potential spouses, the most attractive options to me were the married priesthood holders who already had families. Now, that sounds really creepy. I wasn't like a home-wrecking 16-year-old. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in this somewhat of a survival circumstance where my peers were immature like me, but I wanted like a solid, strong family. I wanted somebody who would be able to provide for me, who I knew would be strong enough to be faithful to covenants in the midst of a really challenging culture that did not celebrate that. And so the people, let me put it this way. The people I looked up to as what I wanted in a future spouse were not my peers, were not the people in the culture around me. They were the church leaders in that little branch. And so I would have been far better set up for success if I were able to be a second wife to one of those men than to marry somebody outside of my faith or even one of my peers on that island who was, just starting out in becoming who he could become. So, and I even had the thought experiment all as a 16-year-old, and I think this has helped me with my understanding of polygamy and plural marriage, is I imagine what would happen on that island if just for 2 generations there was plural marriage and all of those incredible men who were leading the church got to take on some of these young women who could be incredible mothers if they had someone to lead them, if they had somebody to be that rock for them. That island would have been one, like 99% members of the church in a few generations. Like it would have transformed that island. And so maybe that doesn't sit well with anybody else, but it was a helpful thought experiment for me.
Well, that kind of goes to the numbers.
Yeah, go ahead.
It just kind of goes to the numbers conversation that I was having earlier. I mean, by sheer numbers, if you take all of the members of the church that understand the lessons that we've been taught by knowing why we're here, where we're going, and what this whole process is supposed to be, if we then put ourselves in a box and then see what happens, it's going to magnanimously grow into what you're talking about. Not saying that it's really okay that you're looking at a married man, but that wasn't the point. The point was, let me just see and make it make sense to a 16-year-old. How can this make sense? And you're looking around like, well, that's my option. I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years. It could be real scary. But I see why, if that's my option and that's my option and that's my option, why it would make sense if this is the only place I'm ever going to live. I get why you were thinking that. And it's not a disgusting thought. You're not saying I'm going to go be a homewrecker. You're saying...
Thank you. Yes.
That's not what you're saying. You're saying I'm making it make sense in my 16-year-old mind why it would even ever be needed in a situation. And that is, a real life example why it would make sense. Not that you were going to do it or that anyone was going to ask you to do it in this time, but I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying.
I think about your peer. I mean, if that situation, if we're having your peers, the other 16-year-olds, are they just doomed to never get married because it's only like the ones who are already established in a situation like that. So you think about Utah at the time and other cultures, those poor teenagers. One, are they just all, thrown out of society because they're not needed? Or 2, are they like, okay, I really need to be better so that I can not compete with these men, but be desirable? Because if women can choose anybody, then I gotta shape up. I know in some fundamental cultures they are cast out.
Okay, but
you bring up a really important question, and the thing is, there is again lost boy syndrome is artificially created when men are in control, and we see that in fundamentalism. It's because men are making the reproductive decisions. They are assigning women to husbands. The women are not having choice. When women have choice, generally, there's a lot of factors. I mean, are you like, what sort of marital situation do you want to self-select into? I think that there are extreme situations where people would self-select into like large numbers. Like when I'm thinking of like some large celebrity person that, like, I don't know, like that who's hot that everyone's into. I don't know. If you want to talk age gap, I remember when
I'm here.
Out, everyone
You're
was
welcome.
thirsty for Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I knew. I was
And,
be
like, there was- But like 70-year-old Jeff Goldblum, I saw like 15-year-olds being like, I like Jeff Goldblum, and I'm like, whoa, what's happening right now? For the most part, normal people are gonna want to self-select, not into a giant harem, like maybe one or two, but they're not gonna self-select. And again, it goes into agency and the agency of women. And so what we have to also recall is women have a biological clock for reproduction. If you want to have children, that's more demanding of your time earlier in life than it is for men. Men have opportunities. Like, it's kind of like if a man is still single when he's 40, like, it's, even though in church culture it seems like it's a big deal, it kind of isn't. At any time, he can pull himself together and be appealing. Like, it's just. It's not comparable, the types of situations that men and women are navigating in reproduction. Now, what I will say is that right now we have a massively declining birth rate worldwide. And so what we are seeing is women who cannot have the man that they want are simply choosing not to pair off anymore. So I'm really concerned about
You think you make it sound like that is the reason they're not pairing off? Because they can't have the man that they want? Is it because they're seeing through social media? I mean, because now there's so many images, whatever, of men available. They're like, well, if I can't have that, I'm not going to have anybody.
So you can talk about the idea
right now. I mean, that's me right now. I'm single lady. I'm waiting for my Prince Charming, and I'm waiting for someone to step up and be a worthy priesthood holder who can lead and guide me. And I'm waiting.
But the difference with you is that you've had children. You've had a life,
and
you
I was
have
married
posterity. Where there's girls that are literally waiting. They're kind of sacrificing even ever having that first, person they can have children with.
Well, that's true, but
to the
now
point where they
find
might never
myself,
have kids.
Now I find myself with no priesthood holder in the home. And is this like a 2025 version of why it could be a need for polygamy in 2025?
I was seeing the wheels. I was like, she's rethinking this. She's like, wait a minute.
And I'm bring it back. That's not an ask, because like I said, I don't play well in the sandbox. I'm not trying to be caring, but
I want to.
Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
No, I was just saying, like, I could see, like, hey, I've gone like however many years since my, divorce, that like it, I mean, where's all the good priesthood holders? Like, I get it. But at the same time, I think that the worldview of polygamy is, they're looking at the fundamentalists. They're looking at maybe the way that TV has made polygamy look. And to your point, Celene, you bring up fundamentalists. Okay, so do our viewers know what that is, and how is that different than Brigham Young or Joseph Smith having extra wives? Very different. I lived like 10 minutes from a fundamentalist group of polygamists. That's in our modern day. Listen, that's very different, and from what I understand, to what was going on in Brigham Young days. So I think it's important to talk about that and to kind of shed some light on the difference between modern day polygamists and polygamists back in the day. I think it's really important to delineate the difference between the two.
Yeah, well, so early Latter-day Saints, we've allowed, because we have been reticent as a church and as a culture to discuss plural marriage, we have allowed fundamentalism to usurp the narrative and usurp what we remember, our collective memory about it.
Well, and to the viewers, why did that start?
That started because, so we discontinued gradually, but we discontinued plural marriage in 1890. There was some, back and forth pittering out until like the Second Manifesto, where they actually started excommunicating people for practicing it, so putting them out of the church. And so that's when you start to see a schism of people who still, which we call fundamentalists, that still decided, hey, we're gonna practice plural marriage. And they're like, this strange security man says that he kept the right from John Taylor to perform sealings, so we can perform sealings. That's not how it works, but that's okay, mostly because I just want to do a side note on this. Their claim to like the authority of like, well, John Taylor set us apart so we could still, perform sealings. And I'm like, cool. A bishop can call you to be elders quorum president. And when the new bishop releases you from elders quorum president, you don't get to say, hey, you can't release me. The other bishop called me. You don't have the right to release me. No, that's not how keys operate. So regardless on if John Taylor did that or not, it doesn't matter, because when Wilford Woodruff had the keys and had the capacity to be like, that's not authorized anymore. So you are not authorized to do that. That makes zero sense. Okay. So what we also see is it becomes this also very like a literal reading, like this intense reading of Jacob 2, where it's like polygamy is for min-maxing my children. And so it's like, and they created this like weird folk belief. I think that they're like a child must be born in a polygamous union every year or it's bad. Like some group thinks that. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But there's a very highly structured, especially if we look at the FLDS that's the infamous Warren Jeffs situation, where you have this like kind of unilateral, total dictatorial authoritarianism, where they're highly isolated, they're not educated, there's no autonomy. Men and women are just assigned who they're married to and moved around willy-nilly at the whim of Warren Jeffs, like that is not how it worked. When we look at early Latter-day Saint plural marriage, Brigham Young really like handily offered women divorces. In fact, I want to read this quote about that, how much he valued women's agency. This is from Brigham Young. When your daughters have grown up and wish to marry, let them have their choice in a husband if they know what their choice is. But if they should happen only to guess at it and marry the wrong man, why, let them try again. And if they do not get it the right place the second time, let them try again. That is the way I shall do with my daughters, and is the way I've already done. Take this or that man if you want them, my girls. I give you good counsel about it. Nevertheless, you shall have your own agency in the matter, even as I want mine.
And didn't he give them the right to vote way before our nation?
Yes.
Like this is
50 years earlier.
Yeah.
We had the right to vote 50 years before the 19th Amendment. It was taken from us by the federal government because women were not voting how the federal government wanted us to vote. And like in the book, Women of Mormon by Edward Toolidge, he actually says, he's like, women in Utah are voting, have women's suffrage. And like, regardless of what you think of him, Brigham Young has done more for women than any man alive on the planet right now.
Wow.
Like, I'm like,
so that's crazy to me, because in a world, especially in 2025, that is a crazy statement to have said that with someone who had plural wives. And the world wants to say that they're being oppressed. And that's quite the opposite. So it's not sexy to say, hey, Brigham Young let women vote. He wanted them to vote. He wanted them to choose their husbands. In fact, he said, hey, you made a bad choice, go marry someone else. And if that's a bad choice, go marry someone else. To me, that is holding a woman up to their regard and saying, listen, I value you. I want you to be happy. I want you to be in a situation that makes the most sense to you. And if by some reason you didn't quite get it right, hey, you get a do-over. What? That isn't what the world wants to look at polygamy as. So
yeah, tell us more, Celene. I want to hear about what it was like as a polygamous woman in Utah, what that meant for opportunities for you.
Yeah.
Because I think this is fascinating.
Yeah. So like we can for sure, and I'm not saying that there weren't abuses and there aren't like sad journals and there's not like sad things like that were difficult for women. Of course that was the case, but we so hyper focus on that it becomes like, okay, that's not all that was here. You had the right to vote. You had the ability to own property. You had the ability to work. I know that there were also like a lot of, different socioeconomic levels. You have poorer women and you have wealthier women. So I get that imbalance, but is that not already imbalanced in monogamy anyway? Like poor people just have it harder regardless, right? You had women who were becoming doctors. You had women who were running publications. They were in correspondence with women in the East. The Relief Society was a political organization. Eliza R. Snow Smith said, like, it is as much a duty for women to vote as it is to pray. And they were having like civic lessons, and they're highly involved with like, hey, we need to bring women's suffrage to the entire world, at least to the entire country. And in fact, like Emmeline B. Wells said, she's our 4th or 5th General Relief Society president. I think she said at the end of her life, like when they tell the story of suffrage in the United States, I hope they don't forget the women of Zion. And it like breaks my heart when I think about that, because like they totally did. They just like, and like she was best friends with Susan B. Anthony. And so I think that there's so much, and like I cannot recommend this article enough, but there's The Emotional and Priestly Logic of Plural Marriage by Kathleen Flake. She does a really, really good job looking at it theologically, where like marriage was so much about getting these like priestly rights and these priestess rights and like kind of the power that you get from a marriage covenant, and the way that plural marriage was like discussed as something that was empowering to women if they engaged with it the right way, basically.
Celine, can I ask a question?
It's so powerful. Yeah.
When Brigham Young was like, how did that process happen? Would a young woman raise her hand and say, hey, I want to be another wife? Or was it like you were called into a plural marriage?
Oh, yeah.
Under Brigham Young? And did that change from Joseph Smith to Brigham Young? Like, how did...
You had to get approval. So we know Emmeline B. Wells proposed to Daniel H. Wells and was like, hey, I want to be your 6th wife. Is that okay? And he was like, okay. So we know.
He's like, let me crunch the numbers on this one.
let me see if let
me see if we can afford this.
But generally, what we understand is of the model is, and even though there's the exception in D&C 132, I think that we too liberally look at what the exception is. We need the permission of the first wife. We need the buy-in of the first wife. We already know that the best case scenarios, or when plural marriages worked best, is when the first wife had buy-in on the situation. And so getting the permission from her of like, hey, what do you think about us having another wife? And then they talk about sometimes like getting permission from the new wife's parents, and then getting and then seeing if that woman wants to be married, and then getting permission from the president of the church. And then if everyone says yes on that line, then you go and you are sealed. People have a lot of issue with 132. They talk about like the virgins, and it's like if they are given to him, then it's not like they're his, and it's not adultery. And they're like, they're given to him, like what? And if you look at how the sealing covenant was structured, it's the first wife puts the hand of the new wife into the hand of the husband, meaning it's the women who are doing the giving. It's the women's agency and autonomy. And that's something that I think that even though there were occasions where men were inappropriately pressuring women, and Brigham Young actually directly talks about and addresses that, he did not like that. That was not institutionally condoned or believed in. I want to find, let me read you this quote. I think it's very, very important to know this, because people will say, well, they had to get married because like that's exaltation, and so they're being forced into it, and so like of course they did it because like that was their eternal life. Brigham Young addresses this, and he says, you may see a great many miserly persons with regards to dollars and cents. It is just as natural for men to be miserly with regard to their religious blessings. You may see hundreds of elders who say to the sisters, "Come and be sealed to me," crawling round to make the holy ordinances of God a matter of speculation to administer to their avaricious dispositions. They will tell you that you will go into eternity and find yourselves without husbands and cannot get an exaltation, that you cannot have this, that, or the other unless you are sealed to them. I am free, and so are you. My advice to the sisters is never be sealed to any man unless you wish to be. I say to you, high priests and elders, never from this time ask a woman to be sealed to you unless she wants to be. And then he says later in that same discourse, the elders going round telling the sisters they must be sealed to them or they cannot get an exaltation, particularly has wounded my feelings. How ignorant such men are. This to me is like a shadow. To talk about it is sheer nonsense. Let every man and woman magnify their calling in the kingdom of God, and he will take care that we have our exaltation. Let me hear no more, you must be sealed to me or you cannot get an exaltation. That is like really, really beautiful to me. I really, really appreciate how direct. I think that while Brigham Young was direct in like kind of hilarious and maybe like whoa ways sometimes, that was a time to be direct about that. And I really appreciate what he has to say about that. And he says a lot of positive things about women that people overlook, and he valued and respected the hell out of women. I'm sorry to swear, but he really, really did, and I love him.
Amen. It's part of the role.
Well, and I think it's interesting circling back to at the very beginning we talked about the issue of fairness when it comes to plural marriage, and I actually would like to take it from the opposite direction and say, when I had my first baby and I had the weight of the glory of that experience heavy on me, I remember thinking that the only unfairness I could see in the gospel was that motherhood truly was the crowning glory, and not every woman gets to experience it. And so if eternal families are real, if they exist, then the greatest unfairness would be any woman unable to experience motherhood. And for me, I see plural marriage as the great fairness principle that allows God to be just. Because without it, he cannot keep his promise to his daughters that if they live righteously, they can have every blessing. And so it requires the sacrifice and humility and selflessness of righteous men and women, men and wives, husbands and wives, who are willing to share their family so that that promise can be fulfilled. And so it can only be fulfilled if he has people who are willing to enter into that kind of a covenant with him. Mm-hmm. And even going back to when we were talking about the Abrahamic sacrifice and how that's kind of like, it's not a good comparison. I've thought about it a little bit differently too. And that is that the Abrahamic sacrifice to an extent was putting God before children. Like, don't make your child an idol. Don't worship your child more than you worship God. And I think that can happen with marriages too. I remember when, do you guys remember Pastor Jeff? Is that his name? Shoot. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Hello Saints. He one of his first videos he ever did, he was talking about eternal marriage. And he said that his concern about eternal marriage was that it would lead people to make marriage an idol. They would put their marriage higher than God. And when I watch polygamy deniers or those who are obsessed with polygamy not being a true principle, I watch them putting their family relationships higher than God. To the point where, and it's always happily married women who are doing this. It's always happily married women who say, no, I want my happy marriage. And because I was pretty enough and I was young enough and I had the circumstances to have this wonderful husband, I get to keep him all to myself and everyone else can just take a hike. And I think it's selfish. And I have sympathy for it too. I'm coming off kind of strong here, but I think we're just missing the point completely. We're making our marriage more important than God. And if we put God first, everything will be beautiful. It will work out. It will be what's best for everyone. And he will be able to keep his promise to his daughters. His daughters.
That's
my soapbox.
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the opposite. I'm sorry. I think polygamy is weird. I'm probably one of those where if I was back in Utah polygamy days and I was taken as a polygamous wife, I would be like telling the husband, like, yeah, you should go have like 30 more. Like, make me like the middle wife. Like, take care of me, but forget about me. Like, that's probably what I would do. I'd be like middle child, middle wife problem. Yeah. I think polygamy's weird. I'm sorry. If we are ever called to do polygamy, I'm probably out. I don't know. That's just me.
Now, didn't
I'm not
a
wishing
prophet,
it back,
one
that's for
prophet,
sure.
I thought it was Joseph F. Smith, said that plural marriage is not required for exaltation and salvation.
Yeah, so that's
What prophet was-
currently
it was later. It was
I
after.
can't remember, but like I do know early prophets said it was, and then our current understanding of it, because we are in a living church, is that it is not a requirement. I kind of think that it's probably there's a lot of ways to look at that, right? One, the early church leaders were wrong, and we have greater light and knowledge. Yep, that's totally possible. Two, that is or was the case, but luckily Latter-day Saints believe in posthumous work, so it will be sorted out if that is the case, which I know is something that people live in anxiety about. I just believe that God wants us to be happy, so I don't think we need to be anxious about it. Third, I actually kind of think that it's more of a mixture. This is my little belief about it, but I could be wrong. But I really like President Nelson's quote, salvation is an individual matter, exaltation is a family matter, right? And I think that when we think about a covenant people, when we think about societies and like what is necessary for a covenant people, when we look at when we look at cases of polygynous societies, which is 83% of all world cultures that we know about, when that was the case, not everyone practiced it. And so, like, to your point, Tikla, when it becomes this idea of being able to give motherhood to all women, then that is a necessity as a kind of a overflow valve, if that makes sense. Not overflow, but like, yes, kind of, where I think that it might be necessary to exist amongst the people, but not necessary for individuals. What I do know is that no one's going to be sealed to anyone they don't want to be sealed to. And we also get so binary about when we think about exaltation, like the whole point of like Mormonism, like, and the way that like we believe that salvation and exaltation is structured is it's basically universalism. It's basically like everyone is going to be happy to whatever degree they like. Everyone is going to have the full measure of happiness that like and the existence that they want. Like it's kind of like if you are in a lower kingdom, you're kind of self-selecting into that. And I think that that's beautiful and merciful, you know? And so this idea of like, if there is a world where it's like there's less blessings by not doing plural marriage, I'm kind of like, well, so what? You know, there's additional costs that come with it. If you don't want that, then you don't want that. You are individuals, and God ministers to us individually and knows our individual circumstances and knows what an individual family means. And so I just don't think that it's something that we need to be that anxious and caught up about. And especially now, because there's nothing that like right now we do not practice that, although we do have posthumous polygamous sealing still. But I just think that people get really, really fixated on this kind of like it's good, it's the best or the worst, and it's like I think that there's a gradient. I think that's the whole point of the model of the plan of salvation is there is a gradient, and it's okay.
Degrees of glory. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, degrees of glory. It's fine.
We might need to do a part 2 with you. This is amazing.
Sorry guys, there's so many opinions.
I will say like my family's a convert family. We don't have we don't have polygamous ancestry. And so it isn't something that I necessarily have had to grapple with in my own family history. There's a lot that I still don't know about it. And so I feel like I'm, even as a lifelong member, I'm sitting here as like a student learning from Tikla's testimonies and Brooke's insights and Celene, your information, your insights are just like so good. Like I think we should do one exclusively on all of your theories about Heavenly Mother as well. I think that'd be really cool.
It'd be fun, but yeah. Thank you. Keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that the messiness of eternal family in the next life is one of the reasons that this doctrine falls out of favor and into apostasy the most quickly. I think it's much simpler to say we will all be just single and individuals in heaven, because there is some truth to that, right? There is the more like, it's like the primary answer version of it, where it's like, yeah, we will be individuals in relationship to God. And that is really important, our individual relationship to God. The way the families are structured and all of that, it is more complicated. So once you introduce eternal marriage, you have introduced the messiness, because if you're just single when you're in the next life and your spouse passes away and you remarry, there is no complication there because you were just all going to be single individuals anyway, right? However, even if you were single individuals, you would still have this experience that you had on earth that you bring with you to heaven, right? So in my mind, it's like, how could I not be married to my husband in heaven, even if we weren't sealed? Like, we had these marital experiences on earth that sealed us. And so even if we were just like best friends in heaven, we were married. And so I'm not going to be able to unknow that. I'm not going to be able to unknow him in the way I know him now. And so if I pass away and he marries someone else, even if we were ministering angels in heaven, we're still essentially in a plural marriage situation. And I would hope that regardless of theology, you could see the beauty and the potential there and in the potential experiences for everyone on earth and in heaven, that we're all brothers and sisters to begin with. And so we still are brothers and sisters, but we're in families. And it's just the more complicated way to explain the same thing, that our individual exaltation or salvation is paramount, but that there's also this horizontal plane of family in heaven. Because how would it be, like President Holland says, how would it be heaven without our families? Oh, but my point being, I think that's why God cannot introduce the doctrine of eternal families without also introducing the concept of plural marriage. You cannot have one without the other, because it wouldn't make sense. It would complicate earthly families to not have those two in concert. So that's all I had to say about that. But we probably should start wrapping up here. We've been going for a while. I would love a part 2. Tell us in the comments if you feel the same. Celine. Celene, do you have any parting remarks, or does anyone have any last minute questions they want to sneak in before we close this chapter?
I was considering, since we're also we've been talking about Brigham Young as we've been going in and out of plural marriage. There's this really beautiful quote from him from a discourse that I love, where he just talks about how much he loves the saints. And like, I think it's a side of Brigham Young people don't think about, of how much he loved and cared for the people he was leading. And I think that it's just like really beautiful. Like, to me, like, this really speaks to who he was in his heart. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. Would you like to hear it? It's really beautiful.
Yes. Absolutely.
I wish this community to consider that I have feelings of a very acute nature. There is not a man or a woman, saint or sinner, it mattereth not, that feels injured and lays his or her complaints before me, but what it rests upon my feelings. But my faith is unyielding, and I intend to keep it so as much as I can. My feelings sympathize so with the injured that I am grieved and distressed, and my head aches, and large drops of cold sweat sit upon my brow, and no man or woman knows anything about my feelings, and I do not want them to know. For I calculate to kick off from my heels all that I cannot carry. I will carry all I should, but there is not a person in this community that can bring to mind or mention the time when I exhibited one particle of sorrow or trouble to them. I calculate to carry my own sorrows just as long as I live upon this earth, and when I go to the grave, I expect them all to go there and sleep with me in eternal silence. I have never seen one moment but this people loved me. Although I may get up here and cuff them about, chastising them for their forgetfulness, their weaknesses and follies, yet I have not seen a moment where they did not love me. The reason is because I love them so well. Do you not know that spirits beget spirits, and likeness begets likeness? I love this people so well that I know they love me. They have confidence in me because I have confidence in them.
Absolutely beautiful. I think that's the perfect way to end. Well, thank you so much, Celene. Thank you for coming on. I've learned a lot. I know I have.
I'm sure it was a little bit erratic for me, so it'll be interesting to see
It was amazing.
What people want to fight with me about on the comments. But
I know. It's always that's always fun, especially with this format where it's a little more off the cuff, a little more candid. So
when are you
give us
write
some
a book?
grace, guys. We're tackling a tough topic. Yes. Are you going to write a book? No, you're just producing movies. Tell us a little bit more about your film, and we'll round it out with that.
It's The Angel, and it's about it's a horror film with polygamy and angels and spirits, and it's very good. And we're making a feature film, and it's very exciting. And so you should follow us at Burgundy Pictures, and that we announce things. It's on Instagram, or you can sign up for our newsletter. But yeah, I do hope to get more of my ideas out there in the world for people to do with what they will, because I think that this is, regardless of if you're comfortable or uncomfortable with the topic, I think it's important to discuss.
A horror polygamous movie. If there was any movie right up my alley, it would probably be that. That was amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Celene, for joining us. And thank you to the rest of the Women of Word Radio for joining on this very cool episode. Let us know in the comments what you think. We'll see you in the next program.